On Saturday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu approved a plan to carry out a land invasion in the Palestinian city of Rafah. On Saturday, Venezuela's United Socialist Party will be holding its Congress to ratify President Nicolás Maduro as candidate for the July 28th presidential elections. Russia's Central Election Commission registered on Saturday over 50% participation in the presidential elections. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. On Saturday, Israel approved a plan to carry out a land invasion in the city of Rafah. In this sense, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu authorized the plans of action in Rafah, and the occupation army is preparing to expel around 1.5 million Palestinian refugees. With this action, Netanyahu rejected a proposal of a permanent ceasefire made by the Palestinian resistance, which also demands the end of the Israeli siege against Gaza. In this regard, Israeli Prime Minister alleged that Hamas' demands are unrealistic and that it is not possible to negotiate the release of prisoners. The announcement came after a Qatari mediator sent him a proposal from Hamas, insisting on the urgency of a ceasefire and the exchange of detainees. The Israeli genocide continues in Gaza. The latest updates with our correspondent, Nur Harasin.
Day 163 of this Israeli offensive on the coastal enclave, and today is a very hard day on Palestinians, especially after the latest statement by the Israeli side that they will invade the city of Rafah, and they actually started planning how they will evacuate those displaced people in Rafah. On the other hand, and talking about the latest proposal from Hamas of a ceasefire, Hamas proposed the release of all women, elderlies and children of Israeli hostages, including female soldiers, in return of around 700 to 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. Some of them are with life sentence in Israeli jails. Also, Hamas proposed the return of the displaced Palestinians from southern Gaza to northern Gaza. However, Israel refused this proposal, saying that they will send a delegation to Qatar to continue the negotiations with the Hamas side. At the same time, the Israeli forces continue heavily striking the Gaza Strip. In one of the airstrikes on the middle Gaza, 27 people from the At-Tabatibi family were killed, including children, women, and there's also a couple of pregnant women among those who were killed. In another airstrike that targeted a group of people that were walking from their home to a nearby mosque to confirm the prayer of the Al-Fajr, the Israeli warplane targeted them, killing a father and two of his children from the Duhair family. According to the Palestinian Health Ministry, the number of Palestinians who were killed in Gaza since the 7th of October is now close to 32,000 Palestinians in Gaza since the 7th of October. Nur Harazin, teleSUR, Gaza.
On Saturday, local media denounced that in Palestine, the Israeli occupation army arrested more than 7,600 citizens after the intensification of violence against the occupied territories on October 7, 2023. In this way, Palestinian prisoners' rights organizations denounced that among those arrested were citizens who were in their homes and who were forced to surrender as prisoners. In the meantime, the statement further claimed that Israel increased widespread abuses and raids in governorate cities and refugee camps. In addition, also pointed out that the prison service in Tel Aviv uses torture methods against arrested Palestinians and condemned the silence of the international community in the face of these practices, which violate human rights. The United Nations Children's Fund denounced a 31% increase in child malnutrition in northern Gaza Strip. The United Nations Children's Fund stated that children are suffering from malnutrition, which is reaching unprecedented levels due to the impact of war and the current restrictions on humanitarian aid. According to UNICEF statistics, 4.5% of children in shelters and health centers are underweight for their height, putting children at risk of major complications and death. In this regard, data confirms that at least 23 children have died from malnutrition and severe dehydration in recent weeks. This figure is in addition to the more than 13,450 children killed by Israel in Gaza. Israeli violence in the occupied West Bank continues to escalate as Israeli settlers carry out attacks on Friday, setting a car on fire and raiding a school, according to local media reports. The Rafah news agency reported on Friday that Israeli military vehicles entered the city of Tulkarem, where 3 Palestinians were arrested. They also raided the nearby town of Bala, north of the city. Moreover, the forces have also arrested a Palestinian man during a raid on the town of Araba, South Jenin. Australia said it will restore funding to the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees, weeks after it lost millions of dollars in international support following allegations by Israel that some of its staff in Gaza Strip were involved in the October 7 Hamas-led attacks. The announcement was made by Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong, who refuted Israel's accusations that 450 members of the agency's staff had participated in the attacks in southern Israel that sparked the current war. As well as reinstating $6 million in stalled funding for UNRWA, Australia has pledged an additional $2.6 million to UNICEF to provide urgent services in Gaza. Australia's decision follows similar moves by Canada, Sweden, and the European Union. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. All the stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the South. On Saturday, Venezuela's United Socialist Party will be holding its Congress to ratify President Nicolás Maduro as their candidate for the July 28th presidential elections. Party Vice President Diosdado Cabello said after 3 days of meetings at the grassroots level, over 4,240,032 militants decided to nominate President Maduro as their candidate based on his wisdom and great capacity demonstrated by his being able to counteract unilateral economic sanctions and by championing peace diplomacy to keep friendly relations with such countries as China and Russia. Cabello said his party nomination of Maduro is independent from the other 9 political organizations that make up the Great Patriotic Cluster. Cabello said that although the Socialist Party is the largest political force in Venezuela, the elections provide equal opportunity for all. Presidential elections in Venezuela are scheduled for July 4th and 25th. This Saturday, the United Socialist Party of Venezuela ratifies Nicolás Maduro as candidate for the upcoming presidential elections this July 2024. Our correspondent in Caracas, Gladys Quesada, has all the details of what is happening today.
Hi, Luis. Precisely. Here I am. This is the Poliedro de Caracas. This is the main venue for sports events, but also this is one of the main venues for this gathering of the Socialist United Party of Venezuela, the ruling party that today is going to ratify the President Nicolás Maduro Moros, the incumbent president, as the candidate for the July 28th presidential elections. So far, the party has held over 300,000 little assemblies on the grassroots of the party, and so far over 4 million of the affiliates have been debating the candidacies for the presidential elections. Today, people from all over Caracas, they came here from early morning. They have been arriving to Caracas to ratify the President Nicolás Maduro Moros, the main candidate of the party. After today, there are other gatherings, there are other organizations, but today is the most important. This, as you can see, is one of the main parties, the festivities of the electoral time and process here in Caracas and in all Venezuela. And people from all social origins, people also from all the ages have come here to show their support for the ruling party and also for Nicolás Maduro Moros. Before this and in other days, the first vice president, Diosdado Cabello, was announcing the candidacy of Nicolás Maduro Moros, and he was also showing the support of the party for the incumbent president and how this is a key election that comes from the grassroots choices, and also that is going to showcase the will of all the Venezuelans. Of course, this is one of the displays of support, but in Caracas, in all Venezuela, there are other gatherings, other assemblies, and other conventions like this one, but this is the main one. This is the gathering that shows the really support and main, the backing of the people for President Nicolás Maduro Moros. Let's stress one data. Let's stress the fact there have been held in over 300,000 assemblies in the grassroots basis of the party, and now over 4 million people have ratified for their part that Nicolás Maduro is going to be the candidate. The incumbent president is one of the candidates, and among them there will be choosing the next head of state of the country. Let's stress also that this is ahead of the campaigning time that is going to start in the next days, because also there comes the inscription of all the candidates, and also, as we know, July 28th is the main date for these elections. So far, people are still coming in here. People are still celebrating their support, showing support, and coming into this main venue, El Poliedro de Caracas. That's the name of the site. So far, this is the information. We are going to be giving you more details in upcoming emissions. So far, this is the data, this is the report, so back to you.
Thank you, Gladys, for this updated information. Of course, we're going to stay updating what is happening today in Caracas on this important day. We continue in other news. Colombian President Gustavo Petro met with the indigenous Minga to discuss issues related to the defense of life, the autonomy of the peoples, and to reject the resurgence of the armed conflict and violence in the communities. During the meeting in Cali, the Colombian head of state pointed out that more than 340,000 Colombians have died from lack of hospital assistance, a higher number than those who died because of the armed violence. He also reiterated his government's respect for justice, Congress, and the popular vote. In this sense, President Petro urged Colombians to place themselves in the front line of the country's change, which is peace.
I invite the people of Colombia to put themselves in the front line because it's time to move on. The first line of change is peace. The first line of change is democracy. The first line of change is women, black men and women, the indigenous people, the youth. The first line of change, if it is the people, Colombia changes. That is the path that I propose here in the face of your discussions and your proposals.
Petro also affirmed that the Colombian people see the possibility to achieve peace in the country.
I must recognize that there is a part of the Colombian establishment that does see the proposal of government of change as a possibility of a different path, a possibility of a great Colombia, where everyone can win, including them, but above all the people of Colombia. They see the possibility of peace. That is why I don't refuse to lower the flags of a historic possibility, because we are talking about a historic moment where we may have a plural government of peace or a national agreement in Colombia.
In Argentina, the Civil Association of the Observatory for the Right to the City filed a complaint before the Supreme Court of Justice against the rulings issued by the court in rejection of the injunction against the decree of necessity and urgency. In 2023, the Observatory initiated the first injunction against the decree of necessity and urgency 70/2023, promoted by President Javier Milei, declaring it unconstitutional due to the non-compliance with the requirements established by the Constitution. The chamber held that the association lacked legitimacy to dismiss the case. In this sense, the organization presented the last resource to reach the highest court and demand again the injunction against the DNU. Brazilian President Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva condemned the extreme right and accused it of being responsible for endangering democracy in the world. The president's statements were made during a speech in the city of Porto Alegre after former Army Commander Marco Freire Gomes accused Bolsonaro during a police interrogation of promoting a coup and putting pressure on the top leaders of the armed forces. The head of state took the president of Argentina, Javier Milei, and former president Jair Bolsonaro as examples of fascism, Nazism, and extreme right-wing, assuring that these systems are aggressive and offensive to people. We have a fun short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience, you can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with teleSUR. Fun short break, don't go away. Welcome back. Russia's Central Election Commission registered this Saturday over 50% participation in presidential elections. On the second day, the electoral body reported over 55 million voters, and 80% of those registered decided to use the electronic voting system. Meanwhile, 1,900,000 Russians are expected to vote abroad. It was also informed that since the beginning of the process and with the silence of the international community, Ukraine has carried out a series of attacks against that country's citizens' rights to vote in peace. Latin American observers highlight the process of presidential elections 2024 held in Russia. Representative of Colombia's National Electoral Council considered that innovations in the Russian voting system are useful for the development of the region's electoral system. On the other hand, the Latin American Council of Electoral Experts expressed that the ways of exercising the right to vote in Russia, both in person and electronically, simplify voter participation. In this regard, the Russian Central Electoral Commission confirmed that over 2.3 million people voted early in 42 regions of difficult access. President Vladimir Putin said Friday that a string of Ukrainian attacks carried out as presidential polls were opening in Russia represented a bid to disrupt the voting process.
The purpose of these military senseless and criminal actions from a humanitarian point of view, as has already been said, an attempt to disrupt the Russian presidential elections. I'm sure that our people, the people of Russia, will respond to this with even greater unity. Who have they decided to intimidate? The Russian people? The multinational people of Russia? This has never happened, and I'm sure it will never happen.
French President Emmanuel Macron said on Saturday that his country, as a nuclear power nation, is ready for any armed conflict with Russia. Macron's statement comes after Russian President Vladimir Putin raised his position to deploy nuclear weapons in case his nation's integrity is threatened. It must be emphasized that the Russian leader has warned the presence of Western troops in Ukraine would involve the NATO military alliance in the Ukrainian conflict. Britain and France are the only nuclear powers in Europe, but even their collective power is a fraction of that employed by Russia, which possesses the largest, most varied collection of nuclear weapons in the world by some margin, even greater than that of Washington's vast arsenals. Journalists and media employees in Portugal have gone on strike for the first time in 40 years. They are asking for better wages and salaries, a demand spurred by a massive layoff at the international media organization Global Media. Dozens of Portuguese workers started the strike on Thursday, but since then many other demonstrations have taken place which have involved personnel from over 20 media organizations. Even the most important journals are running with half the staff, and although they have kept the presses running for every edition, the first 24-hour stoppage did affect work in several newsrooms. Leading Senegalese opposition figure Ousmane Sonko predicted Friday a comfortable first-round win for his coalition's presidential candidate in his first public appearance a day after being freed from prison. Sonko was greeted by hundreds of supporters outside a hotel in the capital Dakar, where he held a news conference with his deputy and presidential hopeful Bassirou Diomaye Faye, also released from prison late Thursday. Disqualified from running in this vote, 49-year-old Sonko has been at the center of a more than 2-year standoff with the state. Sonko named Faye to replace him on the presidential ballot, a decision he ratified during his Friday's news conference. Faye has promised to reclaim Senegal's sovereignty and renegotiate oil and gas contracts, as well as defense agreements if elected. The United Nations organization warns of worsening food crisis in Sudan in the coming month. The head of the Office of Humanitarian Operations, Martin Griffith, confirmed that close to 5 million people are in a situation of food emergency. The agency denounced the treatment received by the most vulnerable population in special need. Griffith detailed that they estimate that the city of Khartoum will be the most affected by the food shortage, aggravating the humanitarian crisis which caused the displacement of 8 million civilians. He noted that the organization can only help less than 40% of those in urgent need of assistance and said that $400 million is needed for the regional response to stem the tide of hunger. We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on our social media on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.